Like I said, how could you have not seen this coming? How could you have not seen when you get on the crazy train that is the modern Anglo-Saxon right, there is no stopping it. And he should have seen that coming.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Andrew Neil has resigned from GB News barely a couple of months after it launched as an attempt for Britain to have its own version of Fox News. Now, you might think this is crazy. Why would Britain, which already has one of the most right-wing media on the planet, need an equivalent to Fox News? Well, the British and the American media are sort of flipped in terms of the ideologies of their printed press and then their networks. So in the US, you have the really right-wing networks like Fox News, like Newsmax, like OAN, and Britain, on the other hand, doesn't. So the main networks are the BBC, which leans right-wing, especially in the last couple of years, although it attempts to present itself as unbiased. Channels like Sky, which are right-leaning but not over the top. But it's really the British press that is really, really right-wing. The newspapers, tabloids like the Daily Mail, and the normal newspapers like the Daily Telegraph, the Times. They're all right-leaning. There's only the Guardian, for example, that's left-wing, and among the tabloids, the Daily Mirror. That's it. That's the only left-wing printed mainstream content that you will find. All the others are right-wing. And the magazines as well. You have the Spectator, which is probably the most vile shit rag ever written. And even The Economist is very right-wing in many respects. So, yeah. So there was clearly a niche for a right-wing network in Britain, and that's what GB News was supposed to be. And that was the brainchild of Andrew Neil, who was one of the BBC's longtime presenters, a very well-respected. He's one of the biggest conservative voices in British media, that is for sure, but he is, well, generally well-respected. And he's the guy, for Americans who don't know who Andrew Neil is, he's the guy who owned Ben Shapiro. So let's watch that again, just because it's incredibly amusing.
I just
Really?
asked you a question.
And I asked you a question. You failed to answer a single one of mine. Frankly, I find this whole thing a waste of time. If you want to read the book and critique the book, why don't you read and critique the book? If you want to critique me, you can think whatever you want of me.
Why don't you
frankly,
just try and
I don't
answer
care.
the
I don't
questions?
frankly give a damn what you think of me since I've never heard of you.
And I've never heard of you until I briefed myself for this. But that's not the issue. You have a
Then
new
why the hell
book
are you
out,
interviewing
and
me, sir?
it's an interesting book. But my point is, your book claims that
Well, it'd be
society...
nice if you would quote it from time to time.
Your book is... Well, actually, I've done so several times, and I'm about to do so again, if you would let me just finish the question. Your book
frankly, I don't
claims
think
that
this, you know what?
society
Honestly-
is turning
honestly,
its
sir,
back on Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah,
What are
considering
those values?
what
What are the values it's turning its back on?
I'm not inclined to continue an interview with a person as badly motivated as you as an interviewer. So I think we're done here. I appreciate your time, sir.
All right.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you for your time and for showing that anger is not part of American political discourse. Now, Mr. Shapiro, we'll say goodbye.
That was beautiful. He is incredibly right-wing, but clearly not as right-wing as Ben Shapiro. And at least there is a certain level of professionalism in his work that is lacking among most right-wing American commentators. For example, he's considered one of the best interviewers of political candidates. So much so that even Boris Johnson, despite being right-wing, refused to go on his show. He didn't want to go and get embarrassed. So that's the quality of journalism that you have, even in Britain compared to the US. But anyway, GB News is really, there's a problem with it. and I will leave it to the Scots to illustrate the insanity of the English with this very, very good article on why the nature of GB News led it inevitably to the position where it is today. Because the reason that Andrew Neil has quit is because he sees the channel as going too far into the sort of anti-woke culture warrior type hysterics and not into a more kind of intelligent right-wing discourse, which I would have argued from the very start no longer exists. And here's the argument. Yeah. So there were also a lot of like technical issues at the very start, why it sort of started slipping in the ratings, but this is the main point. The main reason that GB News is dramatically failing to live up to its hype is down to the simple fact that it set itself an impossible task to become the voice of intellectual right-wing opposition to so-called culture war issues when no such position actually exists. That's true. Like you can't have a serious intellectual opposition to what is essentially hysterics. Yeah. It's hard to provide serious, intellectually meaningful commentary from a far-right perspective simply because much of the positions adopted by the right are narrative fictions. Yes, like all the things they say about critical race theory, which are patently untrue. The far right thrives on knee-jerk reactionary politics and ignorance far more than reasoned debate, despite its proponents painting them as logical thinkers. Often it does, the facts don't care about your feelings. That's the Ben Shapiro line. Often it doesn't matter how bereft of reason these arguments are, as long as the point is louder and appeals to an overly simplistic understanding of the world. Yeah, this applies equally to the right's misuse of free speech as a justification for the inclusion of even the most morally repugnant arguments. Gee, where have we heard this before? As with the false flags of logic and reason that the right march beneath, the reality is their support for free speech is purely a cynical means to further their own agenda. It seems far more reasonable to argue in favor of free expression than saying outright that you really just want to be able to use racial slurs without consequence. And that is essentially, that nails it. That pretty much nails it. It was going to give a voice to the voiceless. It was going to be a champion of free speech. It was finally going to expose cancel culture for what it was and respect every individual's right to self-expression. Then along comes Guto Hari. Now, this incident was hilarious, and it's the epitome of everything that's wrong in a network like GB News. So he was the director of programming. He was on the show, and this was right after the Euro final, which England lost in penalties to Italy, and where unfortunately the players that missed the penalties on England's side were all black, and they received an absolute flood of racial abuse, like insane. And it really kind of sparked a bit of a mini reckoning of the degree of racism that existed in English football, despite the fact that a lot of them claim that they aren't racist. And this is what he did.
With the benefit of hindsight, I may have underestimated how close to the surface the racism still was. I actually now get it, and so much so that I think, we should all take the knee. In fact, why not take the knee now and just say it's a gesture, but it's an important gesture?
Yeah. So the argument that they always give is that, we shouldn't take the knee because friggin', what's it called? It's support for Marxist BLM, whatever. And let's be honest, that's just a facade. It's the real argument is racism. I argued this in a previous video where I discussed the taking the knee, and unsurprisingly, it got a lot of reaction from racists who insist that they're not racist. But yeah, so now the way that it's moved forward is that they hired Nigel Farage to be one of their main presenters, and he has now a primetime slot on GB News. And Nigel Farage, you would think that he would be obsolete after Brexit, but clearly his message wasn't just about Brexit. His message was much more about xenophobia. It's a far right message that they're openly embracing. I mean, this man should not be allowed in front of a mainstream audience by any self-respecting network or newspaper or whatever, and yet he's still the face of racist Britain. That's what he is. And yeah, so yeah, despite hiding behind the smokescreen of free speech, there is no real space for any form of disagreement within the political right. This is why many who have been radicalized and later try to relieve extreme right-wing movements find it so difficult to do so. Any deviation results in threat, abuse, and more. And unfortunately for GB News, this is the audience that has hitched themselves to it, and to keep them on board will require nothing short of total capitulation. So, why did Andrew Neil leave the network? Because he saw the direction that it was going to. And that was clearly a direction that, even by his standards, a more traditional conservative, as he is, seemed incredibly repugnant and incredibly anti-intellectual. But my question is, how on earth did you not see this coming? Because the right nowadays in countries like Britain and the US are on a freaking crazy train, which has no brakes. And the only direction that the crazy train moves is more to the right. The moment that you open the doors for right-wing content, it goes way beyond what was originally stipulated. Like, you can't control this. Because the fact of the matter is, today, the right in Britain and the US cannot run on a traditional conservative platform. They cannot run on lower taxes, deregulation, free trade, etc., because those policies have fucked up most of their audience, especially their working class audience. And so the only way that you can get to them is culture war. As Andrew Breitbart once famously said, politics is downstream from culture. So go to the root of how you can, politically manipulate these people. Go to the culture. That's why they're all obsessed with culture wars. That's why their platform is culture war. The Tory party in Britain is increasingly a party which embraces culture war as their main form of political persuasion. The same as with the Republican Party. So, this is the rhetoric that they use to capture the populist base, and then once they come to power, then they behave like a traditional conservative party. So, let's not kid ourselves. This is just rhetoric. There's no such thing as far-right populism once they're in office. Because once they're in office, before they're in office, they want to drain the swamp. Once they're in office, they hire all the crocodiles. So, we saw it with Trump, who was very effective as a standard conservative politician, passing the tax cuts, things like that, cutting environmental regulation, things like that. He was very effective at that. The culture war is only to get them votes. And yeah, how did he not see it coming? And he was further embarrassed in an appearance at BBC Question Time. Let's watch this bit.
Well, I had always made it clear it wouldn't be a British Fox News. And I think you could do something different without going anywhere near Fox. Fox deals in untruths, it deals in conspiracy theories, and it deals in fake news. And that's not my kind of journalism, and I would never have set out to do that.
Is that why you've left?
I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to why I'm here tonight and not with GB News on that.
No, hang on, Andrew, you're not going to get off that lightly.
Well, I wasn't expecting to.
No. So, this is your first appearance on anything other than GB News since you announced your resignation. Why have you quit?
In the run-up to the launch, through the launch, and in the aftermath of the launch, and I think most of you who know anything about it will know that you couldn't file the launch under startling success, more and more differences emerged between myself and the other senior managers and the board of GB News. And rather than these differences narrowing, they got wider and wider. And I felt it was best that if that's the route they wanted to take, then that's up to them. It's their money.
What was that route?
And, well, the route is what I think is what you can see on GB News at the moment. People should make up their own minds as to whether that's what they want to watch. I thought it wasn't for me, and I had wanted a different route. Doesn't mean I'm right or they're wrong, but it certainly was a difference.
And is it because you felt they were going too far to the right?
I also spent the summer looking at all the
No, I'm
work I
asking,
had
is it that you felt they were going too far to the
People should make up their
right?
own minds on that.
No, but we're just wondering why you've
What
left.
I've told you is that the differences were such that the direction they were going in was not the direction that I had outlined. It was not the direction that I had envisaged for the channel. But I was in minority of one. So it's doing what it's doing, and it's up to them. Good luck to them if that's what they want to do. But it wasn't good.
Yeah, that does sound like it was going a bit too far right for his liking. So, yeah, like I said, how could you have not seen this coming? How could you have not seen when you get on the crazy train that is the modern Anglo-Saxon right, there is no stopping it. And he should have seen that coming. But yeah, that's the state of the media in Britain. If you Americans think that it must be so much better everywhere else, rest assured that is not the case. Yeah, the British media is insanely right wing, and there's the baseline of people who support GB News, who watch GB News, is fundamentally far right sympathizers and racists. I should know because I know some of these people. So and look at, so I made a traditional snarky comment, which was, yeah, amazing that he thought news in Britain was not already right wing enough. That starting a more right wing channel, therefore, would not have descended not so much into Fox News, but even worse, OAN Newsmax. And some of the replies just really show you what the baseline for ideology is. Like this guy, are you kidding? News in this country is so lefty metropolitan. It's a joke. We needed GB News badly. Like, what the hell? Like, how, or this guy, all of the mainstream media in the UK is left-wing, bar GB News. If you think otherwise, I'd have to assume that you're just extremely far left. Seriously, like the Daily Mail, which every other week has like some anti-immigrant cover, that's left-wing. You've got to be the Spectator, which is now also just anti-wokeism and culture war shit. That's not. So the baseline for these guys is so far to the right that you basically have to be wearing like a Nazi SS uniform to be right wing, and that's how they want it to be. You know, so they can fool themselves and fool others that their content is not as extremist as they think it is, or they want you to think it is, and everything else is, you know, woke, metropolitan, elite leftism. So, yeah, and I just wonder, like, where was the absence of content that would satisfy people like this? I mean, surely you could have read the Daily Mail for your anti-immigration hysterics, to satiate your anti-immigration lust. Surely you could have read The Spectator to satiate your anti-woke lust. So what really was the, you know, there's, as I said at the beginning, there was a niche in terms of the type of news, as in the type of media, rather, you know, that there wasn't really that a far right network in Britain, the way that Fox News exists in the US. But yeah, you still have the printed press, which was super right wing. So there was no absence of your ability to consume right wing media in Britain before GB News. But that's the state of things, and yeah, don't know what else to say. If you like this video, please like, please share. Most importantly, please subscribe, and see you next time.